Hello, I'm Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori in for Hashtag the Yours. It's Friday, August the 20th. This is Africa 54.
The United Nations aid chief says emergency food supplies in Ethiopia's Tigray region are close to running out. A Burkina Faso nonprofit helps military widows and orphans rebuild lives disrupted by Islamist violence. And will U.S. President Joe Biden weather the Afghanistan withdrawal firestorm?
The head of the United States Humanitarian Agency says aid workers are likely to run out of food soon for millions in need in Ethiopia's conflict-ravaged Tigray region. Emma McCarthy has the details.
For the first time in 9 months of war, aid workers will this week run out of food for millions of people going hungry in Ethiopia's Tigray region. That's according to Samantha Power, head of the United States Humanitarian Agency, USAID. In a statement late on Thursday, Power said USAID, its partners and other humanitarian organisations had depleted their stores of food warehoused in Tigray. She added that people in Tigray are starving, with 900,000 in famine conditions and more than 5 million in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. Earlier on Thursday, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres pushed for an immediate ceasefire in Tigray,
humanitarian conditions are hellish,
where the federal military is fighting forces aligned with the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
And we have heard first-hand accounts of women who have been subjected to unspeakable violence. And the spread of the conflict has ensnared even more people in its horror. It is time for all parties to recognize that there is no military solution. And it's vital to preserve the unity and stability of Ethiopia, which is critical to the region and beyond.
The conflict has killed thousands and sparked a humanitarian crisis in one of the world's poorest regions. In recent weeks, it has spread to the neighbouring Afar and Amhara provinces, displacing around 250,000 people and raising concerns of a wider destabilisation of Africa's second most populous country.
Emma McCarthy of Reuters filed that report. South Africa's government says it will offer vaccines to those aged between 18 and 35 beginning Friday as it chases a target of 300,000 inoculations per day. VOA's Clara Frank reports.
South Africa will open up COVID-19 vaccinations to those aged between 18 and 35 from Friday, the government has said, as it tries to ramp up its stalled immunization drive. The country has recorded the most coronavirus infections and deaths on the African continent. But so far, it has only fully vaccinated less than 8% of its 60 million population. Bureaucratic failures, bad luck, and onerous negotiations with pharmaceutical companies have all contributed to South Africa's slow start. Healthcare workers were vaccinated from mid-February and the elderly from mid-May. Over 35s became eligible at the start of August. The latest announcement, made in a statement on Thursday, comes as the government targets at least 300,000 COVID-19 vaccinations a day by the end of this month. In the latest 24-hour period, it managed 195,000, according to a health department website. South Africa aims to have given at least one vaccine dose to 35 million people by December, compared with roughly 7.7 million now. Clara Frank, VOA News.
Zambian President-elect Hakainde Hichilema, a well-known businessman, is being viewed as a more market-friendly leader than incumbent Edgar Lungu. Political and economic observers are hoping that Hichilema will be able to quickly resolve the country's debt problems and put Zambia on a brighter fiscal path. For more on the Zambian president-elect, standing by live via Skype in Lusaka is VOA correspondent Peter Clotter. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Yeah, now we're hearing that following the victory of President-elect now Hichilema, there's a lot of political realignment in the country. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
You are so right. There is jostling. People just defecting, announcing their defection from the outgoing ruling Patriotic Front Party to join the UPND alliance. So some supporters of the UPND alliance who are coming into government now are sending a strong signal that, hey, although we want numbers, we have to be careful, else we get people in who the people have rejected. So we have to be careful. So that is the discussion going on here in Lusaka.
Indeed. And I'm understanding we'll get an interview with the president after he's inaugurated. Can you share with us some of the things we would want to hear him address, what we may want to ask him?
Well, we have a promise, a solid promise from the president to speak exclusively with VOA on Tuesday after his installation. And he plans to address some issues that we will be bringing to him, including his core agenda, what he plans to do in the first 100 days and 1 year in office, how he addresses the crashing, unsustainable debt level in Zambia, and how he plans to jumpstart the economy, among the other issues, and also his anticipated relationship between Washington and Lusaka. These are among some of the issues we'll be talking to him after his installation on Tuesday.
And very briefly, some of the Zambians are telling me that they think the expectations are just too high. They may end up being disappointed. Are you hearing anything like that?
You know, some of his critics called him the candy man because he overpromised. And we plan to ask him those questions to address the issue of being overly optimistic and promising everything to everybody. So let's see what happens on Tuesday.
Well, thank you, Peter. All the best down there. And that was VOA's Peter Clotter reporting live via Skype from Lusaka, Zambia. Now, Saturday is the International Day of Remembrance and Tribute to the Victims of Terrorism, a day that is unfortunately relevant in Burkina Faso, which is engaged in fighting violent Islamist militants. A Burkinabe non-profit, Gopaga, is helping widows and orphans grappling with the loss of husbands and fathers to rebuild their lives. Henry Wilkins reports from Ouagadougou.
Some 1.3 million people have been displaced in Burkina Faso's conflict since it began in 2015, and more than 6,000 killed, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Burkinabe military personnel are among the dead, killed fighting terror groups linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Loretta Ilbudu is the widow of a soldier killed in that fight.
It was the 24th of December, 2019. We were preparing for Christmas. His uncles arrived in the morning, but I was not informed of his death until about that evening. I suspected something, but they didn't tell me anything to begin with.
Her husband died during a terrorist attack on the town of Arbinda. The couple had a daughter who was just a few months old at the time.
He was a nice person, a bit shy and very serious about his work. He spent a lot of time with his family. We used to go on outings on his days off.
A non-profit called Gopaga is helping widows like Ilbudu. Its pilot project, launched in February, provides them with support so they can make a living.
With this program, we teach them to fish. We don't give them the fish. It's about empowering themselves and their children afterwards. The aim is for Burkina Faso to have a system of care that supports what the state already provides for these widows.
Terrorism victims like Ilbudu face complex issues, says United Nations Special Rapporteur for protecting the human rights of terrorism victims.
So we get a lot of good wishes on victims of terrorism, and we get a lot of expressions of great sorrow for their sorrow. But in many ways, and I think we'll speak directly about widows, the reality is that victims of terrorism, particularly women who've been victims, need concrete and practical supports.
Today, Ilbudo is an intern at an insurance company. She hopes to be fully employed so she can support her daughter.
Now I feel ready to move forward. I wish other women had this chance like me.
Beginning in September, Gopaga plans to roll out its program to support all military widows in the country. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 during the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll revisit the star power of a late, great Zimbabwean music icon. A Burkinabe poetry collective is using words and music to create a revolution around reforestation in a country hammered by 3 decades of desertification. David Doyle of Reuters reports.
Mulai Rashid is fighting the advance of the desert with music and words. He's part of a slam poetry collective in Burkina Faso's second biggest city, Bobo Dioulasso. Their mission: inspiring the country's youth to tackle the threat of climate change. Let us expect the disappearance of several animal species, he reads. Man is a passionate destroyer. According to the UN's World Food Programme, a third of agriculturally dependent Burkina Faso's territory, around 22 million acres, is degraded following more than 3 decades of desertification. Burkina Faso's government has committed to restoring over 12 million acres by 2030. Rashid believes the youth are integral and wants to create a, quote, revolution around reforestation.
We want there to be a great awakening of consciousness, so that the awareness is continuous, and so that our numbers can be a strength in the fight against the degradation of our forests and nature.
Rashid and 3 friends founded Afrikanda, meaning African Voices in the local Bambara language, in 2012. Since then, they've performed throughout the region, having released 3 albums and 2 extended plays of poems. But the group is not just about words, but also action. Last Sunday, they recruited more than 24 volunteers for one of their trips to a nearby forest. Abubakar Ouattara was among them.
For me, trees are purifying organisms. They've touched my conscience. With all the waste that's out there, such as air pollution, trees help us clean the air and move forward.
By the end of the day, the group had planted more than 200 trees. For the poets of Afrikanda, that's music to their ears.
Well, that was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. Now, the European Union has provided training to close to 14,000 Malian soldiers since 2012, when French soldiers nearly succeeded in driving Islamist fighters from the country's desert north. And yet, while more than 13,000 UN peacekeepers and 5,100 French troops maintain an ongoing presence in the West African nation, militants have retaken large swathes of north-central Mali and rendered much of the area ungovernable. During a recent visit to the United States, Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop spoke to VOA's Modibo Ndebele about how his country is planning to avoid a situation similar to what has been witnessed in Afghanistan when the European forces leave.
We are very much, of course, we are very much concerned by the latest development in Afghanistan with the pullout of the American military. There are many comparisons in the media about the likelihood of the repetition of such event in Mali. We are saying comparison is not reason, and what is happening in Afghanistan, Afghanistan is not Mali. With that in mind, what is important for us and what lesson anyone can learn from what happened in Afghanistan is that no country, no people, no government should subcontract its security to another state. So that should always be the responsibility of a country and the people. Mali thinks that we want to continue to work with our partners, we want their contribution, but the main responsibility should remain with ourselves. We today in Mali, President Assimi Goïta, the government, and Malian people are also in that mindset, in that spirit, that our security and our stability is in our own hands. We have to do every effort to ensure our own security. We have to equip our military with the strategies, the equipment, and all the tools that they need to fulfill their mission. And we remain open to collaboration, to partnership, to support, but definitely everyone should continue to reflect on the implication of what has happened in Afghanistan.
Foreign Minister Diop also addressed the issue of his country's decision to engage in a dialogue with terrorist groups operating in Mali.
If we say the sovereignty, it means that these type of political problems, their resolution is in the hands of Malian. It's up to Malian to decide how they want to run their country and what are the solutions to solving Malian problems. As you know, we had the Conference d'Entente Nationale, which is a kind of reconciliation conference held in Mali in 2016. And then we also had the National Inclusive Dialogue held in 2019. Both have recommended that we should be talking to the radical groups which claim to be Malian, not the foreigners, but the Malian. But in our view, this cannot be done in the vacuum. It has to be done in the midst and in full respect of some key principles of Malian constitution, the respect of our territorial integrity, the respect for Malian sovereignty, the respect of the secular nature and the democratic nature of the Malian Republic. If those principles are followed and respected, we think that there is no reason that Malians should not talk to each other to find a solution to their problem. This is also being done with the mindset that unless we decide to wage and determine military venture against the terrorists, or at some point we will stop to say, okay, the military approach to terrorism should continue. Of course, it will be the first line of defense, but also we need to look at the second possibility or the second option to engage in for political solution, to talk to our communities, to talk to our young people, to see where we see the negative influence of the terrorist group in our community, to sit down, to have a dialogue with them, to what are the reasons behind the involvement? Is it for economic reason? Is it the lack of job? How can we get our young people? What type of de-radicalization process we can put in place? Remember, Mali is the country of Timbuktu, is the country of a secular Islam, a tolerance Islam from the time of Mansa Musa. So Islam is not new. If anyone is trying to teach us in Islam that is not tolerant, that is not open, that does not respect the need to have different religions side by side, and definitely this Malian will not recognize themselves. So this is what we are saying, to have a dialogue with the communities, as our president said, but also to have a dialogue with the radical group who will respect the founding documents of Mali.
That was VOA's Modibo Ndebele speaking with Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop. U.S. President Joe Biden remains defiant amid a political firestorm triggered by the swift Taliban takeover of Afghanistan and the chaotic end of America's longest war. Whether he can survive the crisis depends on many factors, including the safe evacuation of Americans. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has more.
Chaos continues outside Kabul's airport Thursday as thousands try to flee the country after the Taliban takeover last week. Parents passing their children to American soldiers as they try to climb over. President Joe Biden remains defiant. The withdrawal could not have been carried out more effectively, he said, in an exclusive interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos.
We're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens.
Biden said no one could have foreseen the swift Taliban takeover, a possibility he has repeatedly dismissed since announcing the drawdown in April.
Somehow the 300,000 troops we had trained and equipped was going to just collapse. They were going to give up. I don't think anybody anticipated that.
Still, the failure to evacuate Americans and Afghan partners in an orderly manner and the rapid collapse of the American-backed Afghan military have raised doubts about the calculations behind Biden's foreign policy.
Yes, it was a failure of leadership. It was mostly a failure of proper thought and planning.
In just a few days, Biden's approval rating dropped by 7 percentage points to its lowest level in his presidency, according to a Reuters Ipsos poll. American public support for ending the war has also tumbled. 49% of voters now back the exit, down 20 points since April, according to a Morning Consult Politico poll. U.S. lawmakers vowed to investigate the rapid Taliban victory and chaotic withdrawal.
What we have seen is an unmitigated disaster, a stain on the reputation of the United States of America.
But some analysts say the damage can be repaired and the decision to exit is still the right one.
This effort in nation building wasn't working. It's time to end it, despite the short-term hit to American credibility.
In the immediate term, the successful evacuation of Americans and handling of Afghan refugees will be key to Biden surviving the crisis politically. The next phase is ensuring that Afghanistan does not become a terrorist breeding ground and uphold some basic measure of human rights, including how they treat women and minorities.
The United States and other members of the international community have to agree on a set of messages, clear messages for the Taliban about what their new government should do in practice.
On Sunday, the U.S. froze nearly $9.5 billion in Afghan government reserves held in American bank accounts. These assets will become important leverage in negotiations with the Taliban. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Voice of America has been hosting live music performances by artists around the world for decades. Today we go back in time to enjoy one such vintage performance, a song by one of Zimbabwe's late great music icons.
In 2013, the late Oliver Mutukudzi performed a solo set of songs from his 60th album, Sarawoga. Here's Matitsika, meaning welcome.
tekutambirai mauye tekutambirai nemaoko maviri tinekutambirai matitsika tekutambirai mauye tinekutambirai nemaoko maviri tinekutambirai matitsika kunyanyemi makokwa kunyanyemi matitsika kunyanyemi makokwa atikanganwe nemivango uyawo tinekutambirai masviko kunyanyemi makokwa atikanganwe nemivango uyawo tinekutambirai matitsika musha ungave musha 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 navaenzi musha ungave musha iwe musha musha navaenzi ungave mutema mutsvuku mupfumbu muchena wekoko tatenda matitsika ungave mutema mutsvuku mupfumbu muchena wekoko tatenda mukudzoka musha ungave musha 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 navaenzi musha ungave musha iwe
Thank you.
That was beautiful. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.